Alright, so for this next section, this does not come from a chapter in your book, but it comes primarily from Appendix A of your book. So if you want to turn to page 615, Appendix A is the license law and rule comments. Not the license laws and rules themselves, but the comments. I highly, highly, highly recommend that you read. It's 26 pages. These 26 pages at least a couple times before we get to the end of the class. Because when you get to the final exam, the state-specific section of the final exam comes, not completely, but largely from these 26 pages. Think about who the Real Estate Commission is. They are the people that make the rules that we have to follow as brokers, correct? So do you think they're going to have heavy emphasis in the state-specific section on knowing their rules?
Yes.
And that's what we're about to cover. That's what this lecture is about. So all of these slides are information that I've taken from these license law and rule comments. Now, of course, I don't have every bit of information on these slides that's in the comments, but what I've tried to do is pull out what I feel are, number one, the most important things, number two, the things that I traditionally see students struggle with on the exam. I do want you to make a note for yourself, though. Study this 10 times as much as you study anything else other than agency. And study this for the nitpicky stuff. Their rules. They're going to want you to know the specifics. This is not about knowing broad concepts. This is about memorization. Do you know how many hours of continuing education are required? Do you know the deadline date for that? We're going to talk about all of that in this lecture, okay? So, I primarily just want you to follow along on the slides and make notes on the slides, but make sure you study this stuff. I can't stress that enough. Yes?
Is it all of Appendix A?
No, it's just the comments, which goes to page 636 or 7? 637. It ends on page 637. Is where the license law and rule comments ends. Okay? We ready? Alright. So, the first rule that we need to talk about is the original rule. Why do you need a real estate license? Alright? So why is it that we need a real estate license? Talk to me. So we can get paid, is what I heard up here. What we got?
I was going to say to sell, buy property for another for compensation.
Okay, lease, list,
Yeah,
exchange,
lease, list.
auction.
Yeah.
So basically anything related to real estate,
Yes.
right? For somebody other than myself. Does that make sense? You follow me so far? And I'm being paid what?
To do it.
Well, I don't want to say I'm just being paid to do it, because we're going to talk about exceptions to this rule about how we get paid, that maybe we don't have to have a license, okay? So we're being paid a commission. And what is a commission? A commission is an amount of money you only get paid if what happens? If you close or if you succeed in what you're doing. Can we call it a success fee? All right. Commissions are success fees. In other words, we only collect this money if we accomplish the thing that we were hired to do. Are we paid hourly? No. Are we paid, oh, I worked 10 days, so you owe me for 10 days?
No.
It doesn't matter if it takes you 10 minutes or 10 months, you're paid the same amount because it is a success fee. Does that make sense for everybody? So, the basic definition that you need to understand, and here's why you have to understand this definition. They are going to give you scenarios, and they're going to say, which of the following would require a license in North Carolina? So what are the criteria that you're looking for when you get that question on the test?
Or somebody else.
Am I doing a real estate related activity for somebody other than myself, number one?
And will I get paid if I do it?
And am I being paid a success fee as a result of doing that? Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. Am I doing it for somebody other than myself? And am I being paid some type of a success fee? So a success fee on a sale transaction, we call it a commission, correct? How about like if we're managing property and we're charging a monthly property management fee? That's also a success fee. What have we successfully done that month that we're being paid for? You still haven't gotten to the one thing that matters the most to the landlord. Collected the rent. That's what we're being successfully paid for. If you don't believe it works that way, try to charge a property management fee for a month where you don't collect the rent. And see what the owner of that property says. You think they're going to pay you on a month that you don't collect the rent? Of course not. I don't care how much work you did that month. So it's still a success fee. Does that make sense for everybody? So if I'm managing property for my cousin and being paid $25 a month for collecting the rent, do I need a license? Because I'm doing it for someone other than myself, and I'm being paid a success fee for it. Does that make sense for everybody? Now, we need to pay attention to this definition even deeper than that. Notice it says any person or entity that engages in a real estate transaction. So we need to talk about what entities are. All right? An entity is a group of people who conduct business together. They come in different formats. They could be corporations. They could be limited liability companies. They could be partnerships. Have you all heard of these things before? Those are all examples of entities. So not only do people who engage in real estate business and are doing it for somebody other than themselves and being paid a success fee need a license, entities who do the same do. So let me ask you a question. If I have an LLC, and I do, and I decide that instead of having my commissions paid to me personally, I would like my commissions paid to that LLC. What do you think that means that LLC must have? A real estate license, because the LLC is performing real estate related activities for somebody, correct? And the LLC is being paid compensation for it. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So that LLC needs a real estate license. What do we call people with real estate licenses? Brokers, right? Or licensees, brokers, that works. What do we call entities with real estate licenses? Say that again. Firms. There are only two types of licenses in this state, folks. There are broker licenses and there are firm licenses. So what does that tell you about my LLC that my commissions are being paid to? It is a what? It is a real estate firm. Because it is engaging in real estate activity and it is being paid compensation for it. So what does that tell you? If you want to create an LLC for yourself, what would you have to do? You got to create a firm. You need a firm license for that LLC. Go ahead.
So it just has to be like one person, and like, or the owner has to have a license for the LLC in order for it to be like a firm.
What is a firm?
Entity that
An
has
entity. That's it. That's it. So it's just an entity. It doesn't matter if it has one person affiliated with it or 500 people. It is an entity that is engaging in real estate activity.
So most brokers in charge of their own personal company that's the firm, and the company itself is the entity. Or they are the entity of that company.
No, the company is the entity.
Right.
Right? So the LLC is the entity. And that entity needs a real estate license. And since it's not a person, it can't get a broker's license. So can you make an LLC sit down and take a test?
no.
No, it's not a person, correct? So what do you think an LLC does in order to get a real estate license?
Have someone from the
Pays a fee and has to have somebody as a person who has a real estate license to be what of that entity?
in charge.
And what do we call that person?
Broker.
A broker in charge. of that entity.
So basically, it's not gonna happen without you working for 2 years as a provisional
For the most part.
broker.
For the most part. There's a little caveat there, but I don't want to get into it with you all, okay? Because it would confuse you more than you already are. Okay? Does that make sense? Not just people have real estate licenses. I mean, there are 90,000 brokers in the state that have a real estate license. There are almost 30,000 firms that have real estate licenses. Do you really think there are 30,000 real estate brokerages in this state? Or they're just a whole lot of people who have their commissions paid to their LLC? There's just a whole lot of people who are having commissions paid to their LLC, and in order to do that, they had to create what?
A firm.
A firm.
That's how you can hide it, like you can do it all your own, because you create an LLC.
You
Because
create-
a firm is not the building.
A firm is not the building. A firm is an entity you create with the Secretary of State. And you apply for a firm license at the Real Estate Commission with it. And the requirement to create a firm with the Real Estate Commission is you've got to have a person who has a broker's license who's willing to step up and be what? The broker in charge of that firm.
So that's why.
So let me ask you a question. In a firm like mine that I ran with 110 brokers, was that the only firm that we had going on? Clearly I just told you it wasn't, because I told you I had one myself, right? How many firms you think I had with 110 agents? What would you think? No, they weren't all incorporated. I think I had 38 of them who were incorporated. 38 firms within my firm. Was I the broker in charge of all 38 of them? No. Who was the BIC of those firms?
The agent.
The individual brokers. Who was also their BIC?
The individual broker.
Who was also, that's who was their BIC for their LLC.
You.
Who's also their, so, now, test question, can you have more than one broker in charge?
Yes.
Yes, as long as you're not provisional. Provisional brokers can only have one broker in charge. Non-provisional brokers can affiliate with as many firms as they would like.
Here's a midterm question on that. Some-
As many firms as you would like as a non-provisional broker.
Working for different firms.
What you got? I see it running around back there, you know.
I'm just trying to like wrap my head around it because it just completely went over my head. Yeah, I don't know. Like,
What completely went over your head? Talk
So,
to me.
okay, so you just said anybody other than a provisional broker can have 2 broker in charges, because like they can be
Brokers in
related-
charge.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a pet peeve of mine. You
Oh.
make the first word plural, not the last one. Not broker in charge, it's brokers in charge.
Okay. So they can have 2 brokers in
Or
charge.
22.
Okay.
Why is that confusing?
Because it's
You,
like,
you want the world to be a perfect place where only one person supervises you?
I mean, you would think that would be it, because it's like if
You only got one boss in your life? You got kids, right?
yeah,
How many?
1.
Well, that's one boss right there.
Yeah,
You
that's,
got a spouse?
well, yeah.
That's another one right there.
Well, okay, I
This ain't no different, right? We
Okay.
have many, many sources of supervision. Because remember, we are independent contractors. What that means is that we can contract with, we can choose to do all of our brokerage business at one place. Can I contract and do brokerage business at many places?
Yes.
If many places want to contract me out, certainly. If HPW wants to have me be a broker affiliate of theirs, and Keller Williams wants me to be a broker affiliate of theirs, can I be affiliated with both?
Yeah.
Sure I can. As long as they want it and I want it, absolutely I can. Because again, I'm working on behalf of them, correct? And so what I'm going to do is switch gears. When I'm working on behalf of them, where's the commission going to be paid? To them, to Keller Williams. When I'm working on behalf of HPW, where's the commission going to be paid? To HPW. If I'm incorporated, now I've got 3 brokers in charge. I've got a broker in charge at HPW. I've got a broker in charge at Keller Williams. And I am my own broker in charge of my own real estate firm. And why did I need to do that? Because I didn't want to have the commissions paid to me personally.
Why would someone not want that to happen? Because you don't want to be in charge of a trust account? or?
No, I don't have to have a trust account. So, when somebody doesn't fulfill a service, what do?
Complain.
Sue them?
You go further than that. You sue them, right? So, my clients are not represented by Travis Everett. They are represented by United Real Estate of Raleigh, and United Real Estate of Raleigh is paying Trav Talks LLC. So who would my clients sue if they were dissatisfied with the level of service they had received?
United Real Estate.
And
Trav Scott.
Trav Talks
Oh.
LLC.
LLC.
Who did you not name in that lawsuit?
You.
Because I didn't provide any personal brokerage service for them. Because where's the commission being paid? It's being paid to my LLC, not to me. So they would sue my LLC. Does that create some separation of liability for me? Would I rather my LLC, my company, be sued than me personally sued?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it were all under him, then they could come after him and everything that he owns.
Everything I own. If they sue
House,
Trav Talks
car.
LLC, they're suing it for everything it owns. You know what it owns?
Just that.
Nothing. It owns nothing.
LLC.
Because the money goes into it, and conveniently, 100% of the money that goes into it gets paid out to whom?
You.
Me. It's called a pass-through organization.
So that's the reason why you have that?
That's exactly why I have it. That's exactly why I have it. It's money laundering on a legal scale, you know? Because it separates me from the liability. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Is that something a lot of brokers would want to accomplish? But see, what you need to understand is that in order to accomplish that, for Trav Talks LLC to be paid a commission, Trav Talks LLC must have what? A real estate license. And since it's not a person, the only other option is a firm license. And a firm needs who?
A broker.
A broker in charge. So, I am the broker in charge of Trav Talks LLC. I'm also the only broker affiliated with Trav Talks LLC. Does that make sense for everybody? You following that? So the commissions are paid to United Real Estate of Raleigh. And then United Real Estate of Raleigh cuts a check to Trav Talks LLC. And then eventually Trav Talks LLC pays another licensed person. Who is that? Me. It's exactly the way it works.
So why wouldn't everybody do that?
Because not everybody understands how it works.
Is it hard to form an LLC here?
No.
No.
Takes you about an afternoon and pay a fee to the Secretary of State's office.
Really?
That's it.
Really easy.
Very easy. Yes,
Can you
ma'am.
explain that, like,
Yeah.
in a different way to where,
So that's basically what.
Even if that, if
you're
that's
talking
where it
about
owns
like
it.
a provisional
Yeah, I got
broker
it.
that works under you, and their liability in that situation?
They have all the liability.
Okay,
I can't explain it in a different way because a provisional broker can't create one of these entities, right?
Can't sue me.
A provisional broker cannot incorporate themselves. It's not
Right.
possible.
but you said when, like, if they don't perform, or, you know, when they sue, they're suing the firm.
They're suing the firm and whomever the
Okay.
firm paid that commission to.
Okay.
And in the case of the provisional broker, who did the firm, United Real Estate, pay that commission to?
Provisional.
The provisional broker. So the provisional broker would be sued directly.
Okay.
So what does that tell you? It's a good thing to get rid of as quickly as you possibly can. That provisional status. So that you have the ability to create these protections for yourself.
And do you have to, sorry, I confused myself. Can you start the school for, before the 2-year period?
Can you,
Can you start
the classes,
education?
we're gonna
Yeah.
talk about that. You can start them on day one.
Okay.
As soon as you get your license, you can walk out of that test where it says pass and sign up for post-licensing the next day. Because when it says pass, you got a license. That make sense? Okay? So, make sure you understand this requirement for a license and that you can sort through it on a test. When they give you, does this require a license? Right? What am I looking for? I'm doing it for someone else and I'm being paid some type of success fee. Now notice I keep calling it a success fee. Look at this bottom bullet point here. It says, remember that employees of the property owner, salaried employees, if you get a salary, what tax form do you get at the beginning of the next year? You get a W-2. So I haven't seen a W-2 in a decade, and I don't want to see one ever again if I can help it. I get a 1099 because I'm a what? I'm an independent contractor. I'm self-employed. Does that make sense for everybody? But employees get a W-2. If I am the W-2 salaried employee of the property owner, I don't need a real estate license to do any of these things. Everybody hear that? If I am the salaried W-2 employee of the property owner, I don't need a real estate license to do any of these things. And here's why. Go back to the basic definition. Yes, I'm doing it for someone other than myself, but I'm not being paid a success fee. What does salaried mean?
You get paid regardless.
You get paid regardless. And it is the fact that a salaried person is paid the same thing regardless of whether they sell or don't sell or lease or don't lease or what, that allows them to have this exemption to not having to have a license. Does that make sense for everybody? Go ahead.
And just to clarify, for this salary also means like hourly.
Salaried and hourly, the same thing. Anybody paid on a W-2? Anybody paid on a W-2? Yes?
Because I'm in a complex, and I was getting confused, like when I was talking to the lady, because she was saying how she wanted to get her license. And I was just like.
So the property manager said she wanted to get her license. Face, she was confused because the property manager of her apartment complex said, I want to get my real estate license. What was Faith thinking? You already have one, right? What'd you just find out? They don't have to have one, but what has she better be? She better be a salaried employee of the owner of the property. So whatever, and it's probably a corporation that owns the property, right, if it's an apartment complex. So she would have to be a salaried employee of that corporation. As long as she's salaried. Now, here's what that means. She can't be paid bonuses based on occupancy. She can't be paid, you collected this much rent, so this is how much money you make. She should make the same thing no matter what. Does that make sense for you? Think of other people on the sales side of things who might fall under this exemption. Can you think of people that you might encounter selling real estate who would be the salaried employee of the owner of that property? New construction. A lot of times when you walk into a new construction on-site property, that person in there is not a licensee.
Oh, they have to keep hours and everything.
Because they have set office hours, they get paid for showing up, they get paid whether they close something or not. They don't have to have a license. Does that make sense for you folks? Yeah. Okay. But now, if you got a broker who's in, if this is the arrangement the builder has, here's the model home, we're going to pay you 2.5% on every house you sell. You need a license for that.
Yes.
Yeah. Here's the model home, we expect you to be there from 8 to 5 and we're going to pay you $70,000 a year to do it.
No.
Don't need a license for that. Same setting, one you need a license and one you do not. Is everybody good with me on the difference there? Okay? Go ahead, Sam.
Just take one step further. You said if you have your own firm, the United Real Estate, and then your own one, Travis Talks, and then if somebody sue, they sue both firms, right?
Correct.
But then it's not right, because your firm, 128 agent, all represent that seller. How can he not sue all of it?
He is. By suing the firm, he is suing all of them.
Then does he sue that 38 LLC too?
I'm sorry, no. Does not, because that LLC is not affiliated with, United Real Estate. United Real Estate is contracting with that LLC. It's another layer of contracting.
But how come you affiliate with it?
How come I'm affiliated with what?
The United Real Estate.
I'm not sure what you're asking me.
No, you said that if they sue you, the Travis Talk, and then the United Real Estate, right?
Right?
And why is that? Why
Because they're suing the firm that they hired. And what firm did they hire?
United Real Estate.
United Real Estate. And they're suing who United Real Estate paid a commission to on that transaction. And who did United Real Estate pay a commission to on that transaction?
Oh.
My LLC, right?
Oh, all right.
Whereas if I didn't have the LLC, who would United Real Estate have paid the commission to? To me directly. So the lawsuit would have been against United Real Estate and me. So by putting an LLC in that chair, I'm insulating myself somewhat from that. Does that make sense? Okay? I'm not saying you have to, but I'm saying it's something to think about. Right? Types of licenses. We talked about the fact that there are brokers and firms, but we need to break that broker down into two pieces. And we've talked about it over and over and over, but let's put a fine point on it here. Provisional, non-provisional. You will not see on an exam full broker. That is not verbiage you're going to see on the exam. How will they refer to a full broker on the exam? As a non-provisional broker. All right? So, what's the primary difference between provisional brokers and non-provisional brokers? Not the education piece, but as far as in the real world, what's the primary difference?
Needing a broker in charge to supervise.
There it is. Say that again.
Needing a broker in charge to supervise.
If I'm a provisional broker, I can't do anything without a broker in charge. Does that make sense for everybody? If I am a non-provisional broker, there are many things that I can do without having a broker in charge. Does that make sense for everybody? So basically it is the freedom to act on your own. Non-provisional brokers have much greater freedom to act on their own than do provisional brokers. Provisional brokers have no freedom to act on their own. Who's a much greater liability to a broker in charge? A non-provisional broker or a provisional broker? Provisional. Provisional. When I was a broker in charge, if one of my provisional brokers had gotten a complaint at the Real Estate Commission, my name is automatically added to the complaint. Because I'm supposed to do what? Supervise every move they make. So if they made a mistake, it's the same thing as me making the mistake. Whereas if I'm the broker in charge and I have a non-provisional broker in my firm and they make a mistake, I would get a copy of the complaint, but I wouldn't be named in the complaint. It would be for reference purposes because that full broker is on their own. Because they're expected to know how to do it on their own. Does that make sense for everybody? That's the difference in how the commission treats provisional versus non-provisional brokers. Now, how do your license is going to be issued as what kind? Provisional. How do you get a provisional broker's license? What's the minimum requirement? How many hours of class?
75.
At least 75 hours. At least 75. Okay, so make sure you know that amount. How do we get from provisional to non-provisional?
Post-licensing.
We take post-licensing. We take 3 post-licensing classes. This is the first time I'm going to say this, but it won't be the last. Please don't confuse post-licensing and continuing education. They are 2 entirely different things. Okay? Post-licensing is specifically for provisional brokers. And only for provisional brokers. And you have to take 3 separate 30-hour courses to remove that provisional status. So a total of how many hours? 90 hours of post-licensing education to remove that provisional status. Does anybody know how long you have to remove it? We're going to talk about it even more on the next slide, but does anybody know? You have a maximum of 3 years to remove that provisional status. Okay? How are we doing so far? Everybody feel pretty good? Now, we talked about a firm license. So any entity engaging in the real estate business. And those could be sole proprietorships, partnerships, limited liability companies, or corporations. Any of those. Here's what I want you to add this to your notes. How did you tell the difference between a sole proprietorship, a partnership, an LLC, and a corporation? Okay? Corporation. Put shareholders. Remember when we talked about co-ops earlier in the class? We said that you could tell it was a co-op because co-ops are owned by corporations, and so the buzzword to look for would be shareholders, right, or stockholders. Corporations have shareholders or stockholders. So any business description you see that involves shareholders is going to be a corporation. Would they be evil and say, you know, which of the following business types is best represented as a as an incorporated entity whereby individual shareholders join together in order to limit liability?
Yes, because it's confusing to me because they're saying limited liability and then.
And if they said it, it probably what? Ain't the answer. If they say it, it's not the answer.
It's too easy.
It's too easy. What did I say? I said shareholders. And the only one of those that has shareholders is what?
Corporation.
A corporation. Okay? So whenever you see that word shareholder, now if they talk about limiting liability and you don't mention shareholders, then LLC is a great choice, right? Because that's the purpose of an LLC, to limit liability. But shareholders are only part of corporations. Everybody good with that? Okay. Good. This one we haven't talked about. The limited non-resident commercial license. Well, this is one of those things where the real estate commission is not as hard to understand as you might think they are. If you break down the name, it will tell you exactly what the thing is. It is a license for people that live here or do not live here in North Carolina. Do not. And want to practice what kind of real estate? Commercial. So, you put it all together. This is a license for people who don't have a North Carolina license, do not live in North Carolina, but want to do what in North Carolina? Sell, buy, lease, what? Commercial real estate. Okay? More specifically, these are people who have a real estate license in other states. And they wish to come into North Carolina and work on commercial transactions. They can do that. And they do not have to get a North Carolina license in order to do it. They can send in an application for one of these limited non-resident commercial licenses, and it'll be issued as long as they have one thing: a non-provisional broker in North Carolina who's willing to cover for them, who's willing to say, I take responsibility for this person. Because what does the Real Estate Commission want? Somebody to go after if there's a complaint, right? And who's the North Carolina Real Estate Commission going to go after? The non-resident licensee or the North Carolina licensee who took responsibility for it? The North Carolina licensee.
I have a question.
Yep.
So if North Carolina is the hardest state to pass, do you have licenses in any other states? If North Carolina is the hardest state to pass, why not just go to like Virginia or Georgia or even South Carolina for that matter and get a license there and then just come here and take the national part? I mean the state part. Wouldn't that be a lot easier?
Maybe you should have asked yourself that question a few weeks ago.
I know, right?
Here's the problem with that. Most of those states won't allow you to get a license there unless you're a resident of that state. Most states require you to certify where your residency is, and they'll tell you, no, that's the state you need to get if you don't have a license. Now, if I already have a license in North Carolina and I go to Virginia to try to get a license, they'll be happy to let me get a Virginia license. But if I don't have a North Carolina license and I apply for licensure in Virginia with a North Carolina address, you know what they're going to tell me?
You need to get one in North
You need to
Carolina.
get one in North Carolina first.
Oh.
That's what they do to protect against that. Okay?
How would they know though? If someone would say, "Oh, I'm just gonna live here for a month,"
Because you certify that you're telling the truth on that application.
Well, it's
you know?
like if somebody says, "Oh, well, hey, I have a cousin that lives in South Carolina, and I'm just gonna get a license in South." I'm gonna say, "Hey, I live with you for like the next 2 months," and to get a license there only during the class, and then just say, "Oh, well, I've got the national part. Let me just go to North Carolina and get the state part."
You know what the pass rate is for the state-specific part for out-of-state licensees? 12%. You know why? Because that's the hardest part of the exam, and they don't have the benefit of sitting through the class, so they don't know. They just fail it and fail it and fail it and fail it and fail it over and
And
over.
get
And
tired of
over.
paying the money and then.
Yeah. That's it.
Okay, I got it.
But yeah, in theory, you could do that.
Have
Okay?
you ever done that
Have I ever done what?
for, a limited, non-resident commercial license?
Have I ever supervised one? No, I've never been asked for it. I don't work in commercial real estate all that often. I have, but I don't really all that often. But if you work primarily in commercial real estate, it happens a lot. Because here's the reason this exists in commercial real estate. A lot of commercial clients don't care about state lines. It's not local, like residential shopping is a fairly localized thing, right? But if you're working with Bojangles to help them find locations, do they care that you cross from North Carolina to South Carolina? And so the broker wants the freedom to continue to work with that client no matter what states they go into. Does that make sense? So most states allow something like this for commercial brokers. But only commercial brokerage. Okay, everybody good on this? Okay, good. So, let's expand that provisional broker definition. First of all, provisional broker's licenses come on inactive status. When you get that license issued, you are inactive. And so I've introduced a term that we haven't seen before, active versus inactive. Here is the difference. And you might want to just put it in bold somewhere in your notes. Active can get paid. Inactive cannot get paid. When you're on now we're talking about what goes into being active, right? There are a lot of things it takes to be on active status. But the key thing about being on active status is that's when you're eligible to be paid. So what does that tell you about a provisional broker? When you all first get your license, can you get paid?
No.
No, not until you find what?
A bit.
A BIC who's willing to supervise you, because the only way for you to activate that license is to hang it with a broker in charge as a provisional broker. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay? You can't go to active status as a provisional broker unless you hang it with a broker in charge. Provisional brokers must take post-licensing education. Each course is 30 hours. There are 3 of them. They don't have to be taken in any specific order. They love to do little things like this on a test to you. In the commission-mandated order. There's no such thing, folks. They have a preferred order. They would prefer you to take it 301, 302, 303, those are the course numbers. But there's no specific order. You can take them in whatever order you want to. Everybody good with that? Okay? So no specific order. You must take at least 1 per anniversary year in order to stay on active status. So when you get your license, it's on what status?
Inactive.
Inactive. You find a BIC. You hang your license. What status does your license go to? Active. In order for you to stay active, you have to take at least 1 post-licensing class by the 1-year anniversary of when you got your license. Does everybody hear that? So what's my deadline for post-licensing? My anniversary date from when I got it.
Yes.
And I have to take at least 1 class by that anniversary. What do you think? When do you think I have to take the 2nd class? By the 2nd anniversary. When do you think I have to have taken the 3rd class? By the 3rd anniversary. So how long do I have to take all 3 classes? 3 years from the date my license was issued. Does that make
Which
sense?
is the day you pass the test.
Which is the day I passed the
So
test.
when it's still on inactive status,
The clock's running.
not active.
That's exactly right. It's not when you activate it, it's when it's issued.
Gotcha.
Okay? Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I thought of a question from before. Is there a state test to drop your provisional?
Are there tests in the post-licensing classes, you mean?
Yeah.
Because the way you drop your provisional status is to take the post-licensing classes. Yes, there's a test at the end of each one.
But that's only through that education, it's not through the state.
Correct, you take it right in class.
Okay.
You take it right in class. Don't worry about those. Don't freak out about it. That's what's going on next door. Those people ain't stressed. You know why? Because they're being spoon-fed every answer. Think about what's happened, folks. Once you get to the point of being in post-licensing, you already have what? A license. You're paying fees to those folks at the other end of Navajo Drive, right? The last thing they want you to do is fail a post-licensing class, because then you stop what? Paying fees to them. Don't worry about passing post-licensing. You're going to be fine. You're going to be, yes, there are tests there, but it's not like this. This is a whole ball game unto itself, okay? It's so funny watching people come in and take their first post-licensing class. Every 30 minutes, is this on the test? Is this on it? Chill out. And then you see the other ones that have already taken 1 or 2, and they're like, oh, God. You'll be fine. Trust me. So don't stress out about post-licensing. But yes, there are tests at the end of each one. Okay? And we got to take it by our anniversary date. If you ever fail to take one of your post-licensing classes, then your license would fall to what status? Inactive, which means you can't be what? Paid. And as far as provisional brokers are being paid, who can pay a provisional broker?
Their broker in charge.
Their broker in charge, and that's it. Nowhere else. No client can't pay them directly. Seller can't pay them directly. Just their broker in charge. Is everybody with me on that? Okay? It's the only source of income for a provisional broker. How do we feel about this? Go ahead, Brian.
So once you're in that inactive state because you missed your 1-year anniversary,
Okay.
the 30 hours, what do you do to get out of that?
Fix the deficiency. So what would you need to do?
Take a class.
Take that class. Take that class. But then you would have to go back and re-affiliate It's not gonna automatically pop back to active status, because when you go inactive, you fall away from your broker in charge.
Okay,
So
that's
you'd
what
have
I
to go
meant, because
reaffiliate with the broker in charge.
otherwise, like, what's keeping you to that anniversary? You know what I mean? That's
Right.
what I was getting.
When your license falls to inactive status, you get dropped off of the roster with your firm.
Got it.
So you get locked out of the MLS, you get everything gets shut down. You can't talk to clients anymore, you can't, what if you had a transaction that was closing the day after your 1-year anniversary?
Oh.
And you forget to take that post-licensing class?
You can't get paid until you.
Merry Christmas to your broker in charge. Because that commission's still coming in the door, and guess what they're not allowed to do? Pay it to you.
So do they just like sit on it until you get your license?
Yeah, they sit on it in their wallet. Because they can't pay it to you. Okay?
But would it be like, if the broker in charge wants to give it to him after? Or no?
So they could, as long as they make it clear that they're paying them for brokerage they performed while they were on active status. You know, in other words, the provisional broker couldn't attend the closing while they were on inactive status, because that would be providing brokerage services while they were inactive, that sort of thing. They could, but most likely they won't. So don't let it happen. Okay? Make sure you follow that anniversary date. Is everybody good on that? It's important that you remember anniversary date here, because when we start talking about continuing education, that's not tied to your anniversary date. There's a set deadline for continuing education. Post-licensing is the only thing that's tied to your anniversary date. Okay? Good with that? All right. So, let's talk about the dates. It says all brokers, including provisionals, must take 8 hours of continuing education by what date? June 10th. Burn that into your brain. You'll always know when it's coming up, because I will be completely insane by June the 9th. What do you think brokers do if you tell them the deadline is June 10th?
Wait till.
They wait till the last second. All 90,000 of them. And so in the months of April and May, I literally teach CE almost 7 days a week. Because that's what they do. They wait. Coincidentally, my prices go up in April and May. So there's a lesson for you there. Those seats are more valuable during that. And on June 10th, they may or may not get twice as expensive. Not that I would do anything like that. Because if you're on June 10th, beggars cannot be choosers at that point in time. Would you agree?
You can always just take it like earlier, a lot earlier than
You could, and one would think that they would, but they don't. They wait until the last second. But this is important to remember. This deadline, June 10th, is the deadline for what? Continuing education. And it's the same deadline for everybody. We all share that deadline every year. Everybody good with this? How many hours of continuing education do we have to take? 8 hours. Every broker in the state, whether they're provisional or non-provisional, has to take 8 hours of continuing education from now until the end of time every year by what? June 10th, in order to maintain what status? Active. What do you think would happen to their license if they missed this June 10th deadline?
Inactive.
They would go to inactive status.
So, for example, if we pass the test and we want to take the CE class, can we take it right away if we want to?
You could, but you would not want to, because look at this next bullet point. What does it say about provisional brokers?
You don't have to take it.
Provisional brokers do not have to take CE in their first license year. So you could go take it, but you would be wasting your time, because you don't have to take it right away. The idea of continuing education is to update you on what's changed, right? The reason we don't require provisional brokers to take it right away is, in theory, that you just learned it. There shouldn't be anything to update you on. Does that make sense? So, here's the catch though. We say you don't have to take CE in your first license year. But think about when the CE deadline is. When is the deadline? It's not your anniversary. When is it? June 10th for everybody. So your license year is the first June 10th that you have a license. When are you guys going to get your real estate license? February or March, right? Guess when your free year is? From March to June. That's it. That's it. because it's whatever portion of a year is remaining till the June 10th. So the way to think about it, what's the first time you all have a CE deadline? If you get your license in before June of 2018, okay? So say you get it in March of 2018. What's the first deadline you all will have for continuing education?
June 10th, 2019.
June 10th of 2019.
What significance is the June 10th? Is that just like the
It's the
middle
date
of
they
the year?
picked. Well, I can tell you exactly what the significance is if you really want to know. The end of the license year is June 30th. They give themselves 20 days to update the license records. Because what actually happens is your license won't go inactive on June 11th. They'll send you a letter that says you missed the deadline, your license is inactive as of July 1. So they need 20 days to process,
Gotcha.
to get the course completions in and process who's going to be inactive and update the records.
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay? That makes sense? Yes.
How soon after June 10th could you theoretically take the next year's continuing?
July 1.
Okay.
Because the Real Estate Commission does not allow us to offer any classes, any CE classes, from June 11th through June 30th
Okay.
for that processing period. So the first time you could take the 2018, 2019 CE would be July 1 of 2018.
Okay.
Right now we are in the 2017-2018 CE cycle, which began on July 1 of 2017 and continues through June 10th of 2018. Does that make sense? So you guys won't have to take CE in the 17-18 cycle. That's your free year. Does that make sense? The 17-18 cycle is your free year. You'll have to take it in the 18-19 cycle. So what it boils down to, the first CE deadline for any new provisional broker is always the second June 10th that they get to with a license. Because the first June 10th is free, and then by the second one you have to have taken 8 hours of continuing education. In addition to what?
Your post-licensing.
To your post-licensing. They don't count for each other. You can't count that 8 hours toward the 30 hours of post-licensing. They are separate things. Okay, is everybody good? Yeah, go ahead, Brianna.
What about, the 30 hours of, post-licensing to drop the provisional status and the required, 3 30-hour courses of post-licensing? Are those the same?
Same thing.
Okay,
That's the same thing. Post-licensing
okay.
is those 3 30-hour classes. And there's no limit on how fast you can take those. Okay? You can take, where CE has to be taken in its license year, right? You can't, for example, you can't just go out and I want to take 64 hours of CE so I don't have to take CE for the next 6 years. They don't let you do that. They just don't, it doesn't work that way, okay? Because that's the point. The point is to update you as things change, right? So CE, continuing education, has to be taken within its cycle. Post-licensing, you can get your license and you can take those 3 classes back to back to back and fire them out. You can be non-provisional in 3 weeks if you want to be.
Would you then have to take the continuing education for that year?
No, you wouldn't. You still get the first year free. Doesn't change your deadline. Yep.
Till July 1st.
Right.
So if someone, let's say we got our license in March because everybody's gonna pass.
That's right.
So we got our license in March and then we just automatically say, hey, let's go get our CE right now. I mean, no, the post-licensing right now. Could we do that without even going active?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. We have people over there in that class who don't even have their license in the mail yet.
Oh,
They
wow.
don't even, they've passed and they don't even know their license number yet because it hasn't come in the mail. As long as they've got it, by the time they finish the class, we can report their completion.
Oh, wow.
So they're literally, they just passed like Saturday and got their license and they're already taking post-licensing classes.
Oh, wow.
And they can do that because as soon as you get a license, you can take post-licensing. So if you want to get rid of that provisional status, you can knock it out. I know a school that offers a bundle discount, put all 3 of them together and pay at once.
How much is that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, with the CE classes, that 8 hours, is that just like sitting in class for 8 hours straight?
Is it sitting in class for, what do you think we do, run a marathon halfway through it or what?
Because I mean, this class is 5 hours, so I'm just wondering.
It's 2 4-hour classes.
Okay.
But most people do take them all on the same day.
Okay.
Most people, now remember, you're not going to, I'm not gonna say you're not gonna be paying attention, that would be ugly, wouldn't it? I mean, I'm gonna say, there's no exam at the end of CE. If you have a
Okay.
pulse at the end of that day, you're getting a certificate, right? As long as you're in the chair, conscious or not, you're getting a certificate at the end of that day. I mean, I have a mirror that I hold under their nose just to make sure they're still with, okay, she's good, give her a certificate.
I actually, like, I homeschool, so that's why I was just like wondering. 'Cause, like, my
You
boys-
can take them on separate days. It's two
Okay.
4-hour classes, but
Okay.
that's what we call the general update class, and then you get to choose an elective. So the general update is the same for everybody, but then there are, 40, 50 different elective classes you can choose from.
Okay.
So, but most people, just out of convenience, do it all in the same day. Like, for example, when I teach CE, I have next Wednesday, I have CE. From 8:30 to 12:30 in the morning, I have the general update class, and then from 1:30 to 5:30 in the afternoon, I have an elective class. And so those people that come and do the whole day, they'll be done with CE for this year. But some of them will come and just do just the morning or just the afternoon, and that's fine too.
We have to dream about this stuff.
Oh.
Like,
CE's the worst, because that general update class, that 4-hour general update class, I taught it 72 times last year. The same 4 hours. It was literally like hitting play on a cassette deck back here in my brain. It's like, just roll it out again and
wow.
say the same stuff over again. Yeah. Especially when you do it like 4 times in a week. In the same 4 hours, just on repeat,
Yeah.
on loop. Different people, same stuff. Okay? Are we good on this so far? So what is the CE deadline for everybody?
June 10th.
June 10th. What is the deadline for your post-licensing?
Anniversary date.
Your license anniversary date. What's the first time a new licensee has to take their CE?
The second year of the anniversary, or
Not anniversary, the second June
Second June
10th.
10th.
Right, second June 10th. So just look at whenever they got their license, skip that June 10th, and go to the following, right?
Yeah.
So for example, if somebody's license is issued on July 5th,
they got till June.
so say they get their license July
2020.
5th of 2018, when is their first CE deadline?
2020.
June 10th of 2020, right? So they would get a full year free out of it, okay? Is everybody good with that? Okay? You also need to know the renewal date. You have to renew your license every year. It costs $45 to do so. Please always pay that money, because the only way to lose your license in this state, outside of disciplinary action, is to not pay the renewal fee. Think of the hell you're putting yourself through right now, right? You don't ever want to do this again. Even if you're not practicing real estate, send them the $45 every year. Because that way, at some point, 20 years from now, when you want to get back in, all you're going to have to do is take some classes.
Or referrals.
Or maybe you want to keep it active to do referrals, but pay the $45. Does that make sense, everybody? You do not want to have to go through this again, okay? So pay the $45 by what date?
June 30th.
June 30th. Now see, we're starting to pile dates up now, right? Would they be evil enough on a test to interchange these dates? To say you have to take CE by June 30th and you have to renew by June 10th. Would they do that to you? Yes. That's what I mean about being nitpicky with your studying here, right? So maybe make yourself flashcards. Put June 10th on one side, on the other side put CE deadline. June 30th, renewal deadline, $45, right? So that you know these specific dates, because you're going to see them. Certainly going to see them. You need to know that it's 8 hours of CE and 30 hours of post-licensing. So you think they flip-flop that on a test and put 8 hours of post-licensing and 30 hours of continuing education? Yes. Make sure you're very detailed with your study under these dates, okay? Dates and amounts. How much is it to renew?
$45.
$45. There's a term that goes with not renewing. We're going to get it on the next slide. I want you to think of renewing like putting money in a parking meter. Y'all have used parking meters before, right?
Yeah.
Especially the old-fashioned ones. What does it say when you don't put money in it to renew it? If red flag pops up and says expired, right? That's exactly what your license status will be if you don't pay the renewal fee. That phrase, expired, is different than inactive. Does that make sense for everybody? If you see expired on a test, it means specifically that somebody did not do what? They didn't pay the $45 renewal fee by June 30th. Is everybody good with that? Okay? And expired is an ugly word, it means dead, right? Your license is dead if it's expired. You don't want to go on expired status.
And then you have to take this class.
If you wait long enough, not immediately.
Oh, okay.
They'll let you pay a reinstatement fee for a while. But if you go long enough on expired status, it's gone. It's gone. Okay? We good with this? So, know the status. Active, can get paid. Everything is in order. If I'm on active status, that means I've done everything right. That means I have completed all my continuing education requirements, which is 8 hours by the previous June 10th. If I'm provisional, then I've also completed my what? My post-licensing, by 1 by my first license anniversary, 2 by my second, 3 by my third. If I'm provisional, I also have who? A BIC. Because remember, non-provisional brokers can be on active status without a BIC. Does that make sense for everybody? So, but a provisional can only be active with a BIC. And they are current on their renewal fee, meaning they have not allowed themselves to expire. They have paid the renewal fee. All of that's got to be in order for you to be on active status. And active means you can get what? Paid. Anything else would be something other than active status. Inactive means you didn't do something right. Most likely, what does inactive mean? You didn't take some type of a class, whether it be continuing education or post-licensing, you didn't take a class. That's the most likely reason for being inactive. Everybody okay with that? All right? And we talked about expired, meaning they had not paid the renewal fee. Okay, those are the different statuses that you might encounter on a test.
Would your status ever just be current?
Current is a status. Current simply means you have paid. Okay?
You have to be active or inactive?
Yeah, so you're going to be current and active. You can't be active without being current, because if you go expired, you can't be on active, right? Could you be current inactive?
Yes.
Yeah, because current just means you did what? Paid, but maybe you didn't take the CE. Maybe, so this is a common source of confusion. A lot of people feel like, I can't renew my license yet, I haven't taken my CE. Is that true?
No.
No, you can renew without taking your CE. You'll be current, meaning not expired, but you'll be inactive because you didn't take the CE. Okay? All right? So what is a broker in charge responsible for?
Making sure that, they're in active.
Supervise. That's it. Part of supervising is making sure all the brokers in the firm are what?
Active.
On active status. It's the firm representing the client, is it not? So, do you think the Real Estate Commission would hold the broker in charge of the firm responsible if the firm sent out a broker who didn't have an active license in order to represent that client? So, take that to its logical conclusion. Is the BIC responsible for making sure that Jen takes her CE?
Yes.
Yes, because Jen can't be on active status if she doesn't what? Take her CE. Is the BIC responsible for making sure that Dolores has renewed her license?
Yes.
Yes, because if Dolores hasn't renewed her license, she's going to be on expired status and she can't be representing clients on behalf of the firm. Does that make sense? So, the statuses of the brokers, that's a BIC responsibility. Now, here's the big one, and I want you to pay attention to this like no other. Advertising, marketing, those words mean the same thing, right? There is no marketing at all that can ever be done without a broker in charge to approve it. None. If you see that word on a test, if you see marketing or you see advertising, you should instantly think BIC. Does that make sense for everybody? Give me some examples of marketing yourself. A business card. So, can you have a business card as a real estate broker if you do not have a broker in charge?
No.
No. So let's think about this now and apply it to the real world. We said that full brokers, I shouldn't use that, I should say what? Non-provisional. We said that non-provisional brokers don't have to have a BIC, right?
Yeah.
that they can be on active status without a BIC. Can they have a business card?
No.
No, because that is what?
Advertising.
Advertising or marketing, and who has to approve all advertising or marketing? BICs. Could they accept a referral fee?
Yes.
They could accept a referral fee, as long as they don't do what?
Advertise themselves.
Advertise themselves as somebody who does referrals. So give me an example of how that could play out where it would be legal. How can Nick, who's a non-provisional broker, has his license, is not affiliated with a firm, doesn't have a BIC, is on active status, how can he collect a referral fee?
His sister says, "Hey Nick, I want to buy a house," and he's like, "Oh, well, here's my friend that is a realtor. Here's the number."
Perfect. Does everybody understand that? Did he market or solicit for that referral in any way?
No.
No, somebody who knows him, knows he has a license, walked up to him and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about buying a house, can you refer me to somebody?" Can he do that?
Yes.
Absolutely. Could he represent the sister?
No. No.
He could. He could represent the sister
Because he didn't market for it.
because he didn't market for
But how
it.
is he going to put out signs and stuff?
He can't because she's buying a house.
Oh, okay, right, okay.
Right?
Okay.
So now, what did you say?
How could he if he was listening? He couldn't do it. Even if
Right.
it was his
Everybody
sister.
get that distinction? So he couldn't represent the sister if she wanted to do what? List her house, because any listing is going to involve marketing, right? Putting it in the MLS, is that marketing?
Yes.
Putting a sign out in front of it, is that marketing? Even just talking to somebody about, "Hey, my sister's house for sale," is that marketing?
Yes.
And you need who to approve all of that?
A bit.
A BIC. But representing his sister as a buyer doesn't require any marketing. Does that make sense? So he can't hold himself out there. Basically, it would have to be people that just know he's there and know he has a license, and they have to magically come to him. That's it. That's all he can do without having a broker in charge. If he wants to, how about an email signature?
No.
Nick,
That's advertising.
broker. Is that advertising? Yes. Just for that, he needs a broker in charge.
In like real world settings, like do you actually have to go to your BIC and be like, "Hey, I'm gonna make a business card, look at it and all this stuff," like
You
everything?
did in my firm.
What about like even social media? You're gonna post something on Facebook.
You did in my firm.
Every single thing. What if you're gonna make a phone call?
Phone calls are tough. I mean, so, these are the kinds of things that cause brokers in charge to lose sleep. Because there is going to be a line where you simply cannot control everything that goes on. So here was my policy. If you're making yourself a new business card, before you print it, send me a proof of it. I will look at it and let you know if it's okay. And if you're making a flyer for a house, send me a proof of it before you put it on Facebook. I will look at it and it's okay. And what I would say when I sent it back was, "This looks good. If you want to use it in the future, you don't need me to approve it again, as long as you don't do anything but change the pictures and change the prices and that sort of thing. If you're going to use the same layout, you're going to use the same setup, I don't need to see it again. But if you're changing it, I need to glance at it again."
You did this for 120 people.
110 agents. I've seen so many business cards that made me puke. So what you eventually do as a broker in charge, and hope they will take advantage of it, is you have 10, 15, 20 different versions that are already approved, and say, "If you need business cards, here they are. Pick one." Right? And of course you're always going to have somebody who wants to do their own, and that's okay, but then they have to wait for me to look at it and approve it. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay? But on a test, you're going to see questions about that, about when a broker in charge is required, and what are you mainly looking for?
A bit.
But what's going to trigger needing a BIC most often?
Advertising.
Advertising or marketing, right? So any type of marketing whatsoever is going to trigger that requirement for a broker in charge. Okay, is everybody good with that? Good. I gotta take my picture off here. I'm not a BIC anymore, right? I have to take that down. So what are the requirements to be a broker in charge?
Non-provisional.
First one, non-provisional. That should obviously go without saying, right? You can't be a BIC if you're on provisional status. But remember, the only requirement to get rid of provisional status is that you what?
Take the post license.
Take the post license, and I said you could finish that in as little as 3 weeks, right? So clearly there's got to be some other qualifications that go along with this. Here's the big one. You must have 2 years of active full-time real estate brokerage experience within the previous 5 years. So basically, if you send in the application today to become a BIC, what you're going to say on that application is that since 2013, because that's 5 years ago, right? Since 2013, I have at least 2 years of full-time active brokerage experience. That's the qualification for becoming a broker. And I could even count time as a provisional broker in that. Because if I am a provisional broker and I'm on active status and I'm working with clients, am I full-time and active?
Yep.
Yeah. So I could even count time as a provisional broker toward that 2 years. I just couldn't still be provisional. I'd have to get rid of the provisional status before I wanted to become a BIC. Is everybody okay with this requirement? So 2 years of that, and they actually define a full-time year as 2,000 hours. So essentially what you would need is 4,000 hours worth of real estate experience within the previous 5 years in order to become a broker in charge. Once you do become the broker in charge, you then have to take a 12-hour course that's taught by the Real Estate Commission staff, and you have 120 days after you become the BIC in order to take the class. So they actually let you become the BIC without having taken the class. So as long as you meet the experience requirement, they're going to make you a broker in charge. When you send that form in and you say, I am the broker in charge, you are the broker in charge from that moment. From the moment they process that form, you're the BIC. But to stay the BIC, you've got to take this 12-hour class within how many days? 120. Okay.
2 hours of active full-time real estate experience,
2 years?
or excuse me, 2 years, the 2,000 hours or 4,000 hours.
Yep.
Is basically when you hang your license with the broker in charge, that initially starts the.
That's right. That starts the
clock
clock.
stamp or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. You know, and the reason they put the hours in there is because the question was continually, well, what is full-time? You know, it's hard to define full-time from a broker's perspective. You know, is it a number of transactions? Is it a number? And so they've just broken it down to hours. They say full-time, a full-time year is 2,000 hours. So could it be 4,000 hours spread out over that 5 years? Mm-hmm. Sure. Sure. So you could have been part-time for the whole 5 years, but cumulatively you have the 4,000 hours of experience.
So do we need to keep up with those hours? As like,
If you ever want to be a broker in charge,
Yeah.
then I would say you should track it.
yeah, okay.
If that's something you think you want to do. Okay?
But at the same time, the when you hang your license and you tell the commission
I'm active.
that I'm working under a BIC right now, that starts, and then they can always follow up with that BIC necessarily.
They could. Here's what I'll say about that is, in my experience, they're going to take you at your word unless you give them reason to doubt. You know, what they're going to look at is, have you been on active status for at least 2 years?
Yeah.
Because there's no way you can have 2 years of active full-time experience if you don't have 2 years of active experience. So what they can check is, are you active? The full-time is left up to you. You don't want to falsify it, obviously, because if they find out that you did, then they can take your license for that. But they really don't have a way of, like, you know, they don't have a time clock somewhere where they know how much you've worked. Okay? Everybody good with this requirement for being the broker in charge? So non-provisional must have 2 years of experience. So basically that means for at least 2 years you've got to hang your license with another BIC, right? Because the only way you're going to have 2 years of active full-time experience. We've had people do this. We've had people finish the post-licensing classes. Now once you finish the post-licensing, you're non-provisional, correct? Mm-hmm. So let's say we do that in 3 weeks. Could I activate my license once I've finished those post-licensing classes? I'm non-provisional. Can I activate my license without hanging it with a BIC?
No, you have to.
Yes, I can. See, this is why I have to go over this stuff over and over and over and over. I said earlier that non-provisional brokers,
You just can't advertise.
right, they can't advertise, but they can activate that license. Does that make sense?
Yes, I got it. Okay.
However, the commission is never going to accept that as full-time experience, because if you can't even advertise your services, is there any way that you're full-time engaged in real estate brokerage? We've had people try to do that. We've had people try to get their license, take the post-licensing classes, put their license on active status, and essentially just hibernate for 2 years. right? And then come back and say, well, I've got 2 years of full-time experience. Well, clearly you don't. So what I'm telling you is if you want to become a BIC, you've got to have that license hung with a broker in charge for at least 2 years.
But a non-provisional can technically, like you said, is an independent contractor who can work for more than one company.
Right, as a
More than one firm.
non-provisional broker, they could work for more than one firm. That's
So they would
exactly
have
right.
multiple BICs who they can market through.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Once you're non-provisional, you can hang your license with multiple firms. And there's several reasons you might want to do that. For example, the firm I used to run, United Real Estate, is a residential only firm. It does not do any property management. It does not do any commercial real estate. So if you wanted to also work commercial transactions, guess what you would need to do? Find a firm that practices commercial real estate and hang your license with that firm as well. If you wanted to do property management, you'd have to find a firm that practices property management. Most firms are specialized, especially larger firms. They don't practice multiple areas because what happens is the insurance is so ungodly expensive. Because when you start talking about taking out errors and omissions insurance on 110 agents, and you're saying, well, we do property management, we do residential sales, we do commercial sales, now I'm insuring all 110 of them to do property management when I probably only have 2 that want to actually do it. Does that make sense for everybody? So most firms are somewhat specialized and only practice maybe in one area of real estate. Smaller firms may do it all, but large firms generally are not.
Going back to when you said the continuing education classes with the electives, is those electives kind of help guide you into certain
different areas,
fields of
absolutely.
that?
For
Whether
example,
property
if you want to learn
management
something
or
about property
commercial.
management, you take a property management class. And they could be specialized, commercial property management, residential property management.
Yeah.
You know, if you wanted to learn about commercial real estate, there are classes out there about, the basics of commercial real estate investment. That'd be an elective you might take. So that's a good opportunity to sort of learn about different areas that you don't have expertise in.
Right.
Okay? How we feel so far about this? Kind of getting it here? Okay? All right? Unlicensed employees of brokers. Now, we talked earlier about unlicensed employees of the owner of the property. Does everybody remember that?
Yes.
And we said they could do what without a license? Anything, right? The unlicensed employee, salaried employee of the owner of the property can do pretty much anything. They can list it for sale, they can market it for sale, they can do property management on it, they can do all those things because they're what? They're salaried. Does that make sense? And they're the salaried employee of the owner of the property. Well, there's other unlicensed people we have to talk about. There are unlicensed employees of us, of real estate brokers. Can you hire an assistant as a real estate broker?
Yeah.
Sure. Do they have to have a real estate license? No. So we need to talk about what they can and cannot do without having a real estate license. This is something that's going to show up on the test as well. Okay, so everybody understand the situation we're talking about. We're talking about you as a broker, and by the way, you can't do this as a provisional broker. You can't hire an assistant as a provisional broker. You've got to be non-provisional to hire an assistant. So, you as a broker, once you get rid of the provisional status, want to hire yourself an assistant. We want to figure out what they can legally do and what they cannot legally do. Everybody with me? All right. So, examples of things that they can do, and it's a big list. Can they put stuff in the MLS?
Yes.
Absolutely. Who's going to be responsible for it? Not just the broker in charge, but the broker that what? That hired them. So whatever broker is employing them is going to be responsible for what they do. Can they balance a trust account? Yeah. Can they make deposits in the trust account? Write checks out of the trust account? Can they collect rent? All of those things. Can they schedule maintenance on properties? Yeah. They can do all of that. They can put signs up in front of properties. Here's where you have to differentiate. Look at this last one. Show property for rent. And it says yes, they can show rental property, but what?
Never for sale.
Never property that is for sale. An unlicensed broker's assistant cannot enter a property that's for sale without the broker being with them. Period. For any reason. Okay? Is everybody with me on that? If you have an unlicensed assistant, they cannot show that property that's for sale.
Why do I feel like that rule is broken?
cause it is, a lot, yeah, it is.
Because I mean, I ran into that situation when my wife and I were looking at houses. My wife was the broker at the time.
Yep,
We went to a house, there was a girl there showing the house, but she couldn't get in because of one of those fancy lock boxes.
right.
And it happened to be that she was the assistant of the broker. She
Uh-huh.
wasn't actually a licensed one.
She
She was
wasn't
just
licensed.
after hours just trying to
Help out,
help out,
yeah.
you know?
I have been to open houses that were being held by unlicensed assistants.
Mhm.
That is not allowed. That is not allowed. Now, if it's a rental property, could they do that?
Yeah.
Yes, but not one that's for sale.
Well, that's what I mean, that's what I do. all the
That's
time.
the differing characteristic, okay? Ones that are rent can be shown by an unlicensed assistant, not ones that are for sale. Now remember, this is not for assistants or employees of the property owner itself. We're talking about employees of the broker, right? Broker assistants. Everybody understands that, right?
So they can go on the property to put a lockbox or a sign, they cannot go inside.
Correct.
Okay.
Can't go in the door without the broker present.
What does that count as in the property?
No, in the door, inside, okay? Now, it also says they cannot negotiate. So here's an example of where you might run into trouble. Let's say, or your family does property management, right? And you're unlicensed right now,
Right.
okay? So Fabian can perform a number of functions right now. Can he collect rent for those people every month? Yes. Can he call and schedule maintenance?
Yes.
If they want him to go show one of their property management listings to a potential tenant, can he do that?
Yes.
Absolutely. The tenant calls and says, well, how much was the rent on that one again? And he says it's $1,100 a month. And they say, well, I'd be willing to pay $1,050. Can Fabian continue that conversation?
No.
Because at that point it is what? It's a negotiation. At that point he has to say, I'm sorry, I have to put you in touch with the broker. You can't continue that conversation. Does that make sense to you guys? That's the line in the sand. So basically he can give out any information that's already publicly available, but he can't even say, well, I'll relay that to them. He has to say, I'm sorry, I can't answer that question for you. I will get you in touch with who you need to talk to. Because you cannot engage in that negotiation. You can't even be the go-between. Does that make sense? Okay, that's the line in the sand. So the
What
two.
about, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
What about if they asked if they would consider selling?
Well, once we've ventured into selling, again, we're out of the bounds of what an assistant can deal with. So we gotta go to the broker at that point in time.
Right, the conversation would end there.
Conversation would end right there. Yep, absolutely. And we also run into this complication. Sometimes people list things for both sale and lease at the same time. You should never let an unlicensed person show that. Because even if they think they're showing it to a tenant, could the conversation instantly change to, oh, well, you know, we're trying to fix our credit. We're really looking for something that we could do a lease to own. Now we're talking about a sale, right?
Yeah.
And they're already in the house, and boom, you broke the law. You know, so if it's for sale at all, it should not be shown by an unlicensed assistant. Okay. But a lot of this stuff is, you know, broker type functions that can be done by that unlicensed person. Just keep in mind, it's the broker who's going to be held responsible for, not. I mean, obviously the real estate commission can't do anything with an unlicensed person, because what's the worst thing the real estate commission could do? Revoke your license. They don't have one. So, you know, they have no oversight over somebody who doesn't have a license in that case. So they're coming after the licensed person. So you better trust that unlicensed person if you're going to take them on. So this is just kind of a reminder of the exemptions to needing a license again. Salaried W-2 employees of the owner of the real estate. Okay? So again, I'm a salary employee of the owner of the real estate. I'm exempt from needing a license. That's our on-site agent, our property manager at an apartment complex. Because they're the salaried employee of the property owner, they don't need a license. Also, trustees or executors of estates. So like, for example, if you're the executor of an estate and the person dies and you have to sell that property, you don't need a real estate license for that. Okay? Because you're performing that as an executor, not as a broker. Does that make sense for everybody? And also attorneys who are doing that for, you know, for example, like they're a trustee. They're managing a trust and they need to sell part of the property that belongs to the trust. Now, they can do that and they can charge a fee for doing that, but they cannot just routinely engage in brokerage. That would require a broker's license. Attorneys aren't exempt from needing broker's license, only if they're selling it as a function of some legal duty they're performing for somebody. They can get paid, right, but they're billing for the legal function, not for the brokerage of the deal. So like, for example, if I put all my property into a trust and name my friend Rob Maitland, who's an attorney in Chapel Hill, as the trustee, okay? And then down the road, he needs to sell one of the properties that's owned by that trust in order to continue to fund the obligations of the trust. So like the trust is supporting, say, my nephew, right? And he needs to sell one of those properties in order to have the funds to continue that support. Does that make sense? Everybody follow what's going on? He can sell that property and he can charge a fee for selling it. But he's charging it as an attorney, not as a real estate broker. Does that make sense? Because he's performing that function as a trustee, not as a broker. But what he couldn't do is have somebody walk in his office and go, you know, I'd really like you to sell my house for me. Because that's just straight up brokerage. That's not a legal function at that point. It's just straight, and he would need a broker's license for that. Okay, everybody good with that? These exemptions? Because you may see those on the test as well. The commissioners themselves, and these are photos of the 9 current members of the North Carolina Real Estate Commission, if you've ever wondered what they look. By the way, there's a commission hearing tomorrow. If you'd like to go in the snow, you can go visit our friends down the street tomorrow. There's the monthly commission meeting tomorrow. I usually try to attend, but I don't know if I'm going to try to trudge over there in the snow tomorrow. I'm assuming they'll still have it if it snows. This is the current chairperson. His name's Bob Ramser. He's a closing attorney here in Raleigh. But these are the 9 members of the Real Estate Commission. So let's talk about how that is structured over there. These 9 people do not work for the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. Let me say that again. These 9 people do not work for the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. These 9 people are the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. There is a big difference there. If you drive down the street to 1313 Navajo Drive and you walk in the front door, there's 100 people that work in that building. They work for the commission. These people are the commission. Does that make sense? This is unpaid. These people are not paid. These are political appointees. These people are appointed by the governor of the state and the General Assembly of the state to serve as real estate commissioners. So these people make the rules. The people that work over there, what do you think their job is? Enforce the rules. Does that make sense for everybody? These people make the rules. The people that are over there full time, that's their job, they enforce the rules. Okay? So these people are going to be appointed to 3-year terms, and they can be reappointed. Right? You need to know that there are 9 of them in total. 7 of them are appointed by the governor, and 1 each by the North Carolina House and the North Carolina Senate. Okay? 7 by the governor, 1 each by the House and the Senate. The other rules that apply to the commissioners, at least, here's what the state law says. At least 3 members of the commission at any given time must have a real estate license. Everybody with me on that? At least 2 of them cannot have a real estate license. So there have to be at least 2 what we call at-large members. People who have no dog in the fight. They are not engaged in real estate brokerage in any way. What do you think their role is there to do?
Be biased, like unbiased.
Voice of who?
The public.
The public. They are the voice of the public. That's because what we don't want is 9 people who are all real estate brokers making rules against what? Real estate brokers. We want to make sure that the public has some voice in this. And so there have to be at least 2 of them that don't have a real estate license. Okay? Yes?
So who votes?
They're appointed.
There is no vote. They are appointed either by the governor. So 7 of them are appointed by the governor of the state. And the other 2 are appointed by the North Carolina General Assembly. 1 by the House of Representatives, 1 by the Senate.
How do they like?
How do they qualify?
Yeah, you just like randomly pick
Well,
people.
remember, the only qualifications are that there have to be 3 of them who have a real estate license and 2 of them who do not.
It's all been
These
none of
are
those people
political appointees, correct? So think about any political appointments. What is going to be the primary consideration here? That you are politically aligned with the person who is appointing you. I mean, isn't that the way that political appointments work, okay? So, at any given time, you can expect that the real estate commissioners are a reflection of the politics of the people who are doing the appointing. It's just the way, I'm not saying that in a good, bad, or indifferent way. I'm just saying this is the way the appointments work. That is the way it is. Now, what I will say is that generally speaking, what you end up with is 7 of them who are very actively engaged in real estate brokerage and real estate in North Carolina, and 2 who are not. Because generally speaking, there's only going to be the 2 that are required to not be involved that are going to be that way. There could be more, right? But that's not the way it works, generally speaking. So, most likely what you find, these are going to be people who are very involved in real estate brokerage in the state, very respected in real estate brokerage in the state, who happen to have some political connection to mainly the governor, because if you see 7 of the 9 are appointed by the governor. So what you can expect is that currently there would be some change in makeup of the viewpoint of the Real Estate Commission, right? Because we have a different brand of governor now than we had, a year and a half ago. So that as these people, now they don't just go away because the governor changed, but as their terms come to an end, it is very likely that the new governor would probably appoint different people than the previous governor had appointed, because they would probably be looking for a different mindset.
Is it staggered or?
It is staggered.
Okay.
Yeah. So you always have, in any given year, you in any given year have at least 2 that are rolling off, and sometimes 3, depending on how it works out.
Okay.
And again, they can be reappointed. Like for example, George Bell is in his 2nd term now. Cindy Chandler's in her 2nd term. Tommy Lawing's in his 3rd term, and I want to say that Mr. Craver's also in his 3rd term. So that there have been some that have been there for a while now. It's not unusual to see ones be reappointed. Yep.
How do they decide? If they voted, obviously it would be uneven as far as.
How do they decide on what rules they pass and that sort of thing?
Yeah.
So that's a good question. And what they do is the staff over there comes up with proposed rule changes. So the staff looks at what complaints are coming in, what disciplinary action cases we've taken, the way state laws change, the problems that are happening, and so the staff will bring them proposed rule changes, and then they will have discussion about those proposed rule changes and what concerns they might have with them and whether they like this or don't like that. And so then they will take votes to either, we're not going to make a change, or we're going to open this up. They call it open the rulemaking. They'll open the rulemaking and they'll consider making that change. And it could take a year for a rule change to make its way through to where they finally adopt it, and then it could take another year to implement that rule change. We implement rule changes as of July 1 because that's a new license year.
But wouldn't that, there's some unbalance there, so probably most of those rules favor.
Well, I don't think it's nearly as bad as you would think. Quite honestly, I've never been able to, I can't sit in the room and tell what the politics are of the people that are up there. I can guess based on who appointed them, right? But I've never noticed that any of them are openly, brazenly political in any of their stances on anything. What I find is that most of the time, they are very well reasoned, and they all want to do the right thing. They all want to protect the public. They all want to make reasonable rules, but they also don't want to be, terribly ridiculously hard on brokers and put brokers in an impossible situation. It's an interesting thing. If you all are ever interested, I usually offer during my classes at least one time when they're having a hearing. If you all want to go, I'd be glad to take you over there if you'd like to see. They generally try to put on a little bit of a show. If they know I'm bringing a group, they'll probably try to like shuffle their schedule and have a disciplinary case or something going on, because they know you like to see that more than anything else. I would not suggest tomorrow because of the weather, but we'll still be here in mid-February. If you all would like me to, I could send them an email and set up to go to the February commission hearing, and we'll see if we can, maybe get a good disciplinary case on deck for you, and you can see one of those in action. So, but I mean, it's a good thing to see what goes on behind the scenes over there, what they actually do. And so, again, they don't work for the commission. They simply come in for 2 days every month, and they hold a 2-day, meeting. And part of that's going to be talk about proposed rule changes. Part of that's going to be to vote on rule changes. Part of that's going to be disciplinary. They're always going to have a section of their meeting every month that's going to be devoted to trying disciplinary cases, because these would be the people who would vote on whether or not your license would be suspended, reprimanded, revoked, or none of the above. Be up to them ultimately. They're the only ones that can enforce disciplinary. Even if the staff comes to like a settlement agreement. Like, for example, there have been times when the staff proposes, well, this person wants to take a 30-day suspension. And we've agreed with that. The commissioners still have to vote to accept that plea agreement, right? So if they feel like that's not enough, they could vote down that plea agreement and say, no, go back to the drawing board. We want something stronger than that. But these are the people who, they create the rules and they apply the discipline. The ones who enforce the rules are the employees. Okay? We good with that distinction? Kind of got it set up over there? All right? And we talk about what authority they have. They have the authority to reprimand. They have the authority to suspend. They have the authority to revoke. And they have the authority to fine timeshare developers. But they can never fine who? Licensees. And even broader than that, they can't do anything as it relates to licensees and money. Be careful of this on an exam. Anything to do with us and money, they don't have authority over. So if you see a test question and it says, the Real Estate Commission limits commissions that can be charged by brokers to this amount, is that going to be a true statement? No. No, because they don't deal with our money. The Real Estate Commission could force a broker to refund a commission to a client. No, because they don't deal with our money. They don't deal with us and money. That's not part of their deal. Okay? Is everybody all right on that? So nothing to do with money and licensees for the commission.
So what only tricky is the timeshare, right?
Timeshare is the only time they can fine. That's the only time they can do anything related to money, is to fine a timeshare. And even then they can't fine the brokers involved. They fine the developer. They can never fine a broker. It's not what they do. All right? So why do they discipline people? Well, obviously for violating their rules. That's the number one reason they discipline people, for violating commission rules. The biggest example of that would be practicing law without a license. And what's the number one example of practicing law without a license?
Giving legal advice.
That's second. Giving legal advice is second. What's number one? Drafting documents. Writing contract language. Creating contracts. What are we allowed to do? Fill in the blanks. That's it. Don't draft contract language. That is the practice of law. That's for an attorney to do, not for us to do. They often have disciplinary cases for self-dealing. Self-dealing is defined as doing something to help yourself ahead of your client. And I've given an example here. It says the broker may not represent the buyer when the broker is the seller. Well, now think about that, right? Can I borrow you for a second, Faith?
Yes.
So let's say Faith has come to an open house that I'm holding, right? So now, what am I? I'm the listing broker, right? Oh, by the way, did I mention this is also my house that I've lived in for the last 10 years? So I'm the listing broker, correct? But I'm also the what?
The owner.
The seller, the owner, right? Faith, what'd you think of the house? You love it, right? It's beautiful. Of course it is. Do you have an agent? Would you like one? I'd be happy to represent you.
You can't do that.
What? Doesn't that seem like insane anyway, right? How could I possibly represent her
Against yourself.
against me, right? You'd think we wouldn't have to have a rule for this. Guess what?
You got
You do.
We do. You know why we have to have a rule for it?
It happens.
Because somebody did it. That's why they put the little, on the little bag of stuff that comes in your new pair of shoes, do not eat this. You know why they put it there? Somebody ate it. That's why they put it there in the first place. Somebody thought it would be delicious. Why not? It comes in shoes. It should be delicious, right? So they ate it. So they have to put it on the bag now. Don't eat this, dummy, right? Don't put this plastic bag over your head. It's a bad idea. They have to print that on the plastic bag. Well, we have to put this rule because people are stupid enough to do it. Don't do that. That's called self-dealing. Anytime you put yourself ahead of your client, it's called self-dealing, and it's a bad idea.
People still do it though.
Of course they do. People still do it.
It's a physical.
So what should I say to Faith if she says she's interested in it? What should I say to her?
I can refer you to another client.
I could refer her. What's the most basic thing I could say?
Okay.
I would
I'm
just
the
say,
seller.
I'm the seller. It's my house. So obviously, I can't give you any advice on it. It's nice to hear that you like it. If you don't have an agent, that's okay. You don't have to have one, right? But if you would like one, it's going to have to be somebody other than me. Because I can't possibly do that. Does that make sense? Could another broker from the firm come in and represent her?
Yeah.
Sure, it would be dual agency, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe what?
Designated.
Maybe designated dual agency, but I couldn't work with her. Not as a buyer's agent. I could work with her as a seller sub-agent because I'm just saying to her, listen, I represent the seller. I am the seller. Don't tell me anything you wouldn't want me to know. And that's how I would handle that. Okay? Also, misrepresentation and omission. That's another major disciplinary action. And the one that I don't have on here, that's probably the most common thing that gets disciplined for, trust account violations. Sticky fingers. Money. That tends to be a problem. Improper management of a trust account, commingling, all kinds of things that go on when you don't manage trust accounts appropriately. And we're going to talk specifically about trust account rules as well. And then the last thing that we'll talk about today, and I'll let you go. Things that the commission does not deal with, and I've already hinted on most of these. They do not care about you getting paid. They are not going to get in the middle of some dispute between you and another broker or another firm about your commission. They don't care. It's not their job. They will not get involved with anything regarding commissions. Any discussion about commissions, any non-payment of commissions, any negotiation about commissions, they're just not going to get involved. Make sure you pay attention to that on a test. Anything to do with us and money just is not their thing. Okay?
I have a quick question.
Okay?
So based on what you were saying before about the self-dealing, what if there's a for sale by owner and they're just like there's just a sign in the yard for sale by owner, and a person comes or a person's agent comes and says, hey, I have a potential buyer, and then they come look at it, they want to buy it or whatever the case is. Who would pay the listing agent? Who would pay the buyer's agent?
It's a good question. Well, do they have an agreement with the seller to pay them?
Well, I guess so. Like they don't know.
No, they don't. So who would they have to get paid by?
Oh, the buyers would have to pay them. Oh.
Unless the seller says they're willing to. Now, if I'm the buyer's agent, who am I going to ask to pay me first?
If you're the what?
If I'm the buyer's agent, who am I going to ask to pay me first in that situation?
The buyer. The seller.
The seller. I'm going to say to the seller, I have a buyer who's interested in your property. Would you be willing to pay me a commission if they buy your property? And if the seller says yes, what am I going to do before I show the property? Get it in writing. I'm going to send them, it's called an unrepresented seller agreement. And it's not a listing. I'm not representing the seller. They're just saying, I recognize that you have a buyer that you represent, and if this buyer buys my property, I will pay you this commission. That's a contract. So that if my buyer buys that property, they'll pay me. But what if they say, no, I won't pay you?
It's going to be up to the buyer to pay you.
I'm going to say to the buyer, I'm happy to show it to you, just FYI, they're not willing to pay me, so if you buy that house, not only do you have to pay them for the house, you have to pay me for my commission.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay?
Does the common buyer agency agreement that most people use, it have the agent for that?
It does. So the buyer agency, Jen's question was the standard buyer agency agreement that comes from the Association of Realtors, does it have a provision for that? That's exactly what it says. What it says is, here's my fee, fill in the blank, this is my fee. I'm going to attempt to obtain it from the seller or from a cooperating real estate firm. If I can't get it from them, then you, the buyer, agree to pay it.
Oh, wow.
That's what the buyer agency agreement says. Okay? So, for Thursday, or
If we're here.
Tuesday, depending upon, chapters 11 and 12, which is landlord and tenant and property management. That's going to be the next thing on the agenda. 11 and 12, which is landlord and tenant and property management. Okay? I'll see y'all. I'll see you on Tuesday no matter what, because I'll be in Arizona on Thursday. But I will let you know what's going on with the weather.
Folks are leaving tomorrow for everyone.
Oh, are they? Phoenix or Tucson? Or
Phoenix.
Phoenix, I'm going to be in Tucson.